Hey everyone, it's good to see you. So, recently heard some news that I thought was pretty interesting. Was as I was reading some articles and seeing what was going on in the gaming news space, was that Embracer Group, who, not to do a full kind of summary, but junk conglomerate that hoped to sell 80% of the world's IPs to Saudi Arabia, and all that fell through in the wayside and is now just destroying studios by laying people off and closing them and so on and so forth. Well, they decided to sell Gearbox, which is pretty interesting, and sell them to 2K nonetheless. So I thought this was interesting news, and I wanted to talk a bit about it. One of the things I wanted to share first and foremost is that I have quite a soft spot for Gearbox. They're not the perfect company, and of course they're spearheaded by the very wacky and zany Randy Pitchford. But being that they were some, mostly 3D Realms guys who were breaking off and kind of doing their own thing, and they started developing, and where I get my love of Gearbox from, the Half-Life expansions, opposing Force, Blue Shift. They also did Half-Life Decay on the PS2, which is pretty sick. And they went on to create, Brothers in Arms and Borderlands, and even the terrible but lovable, in my eyes, Duke Nukem Forever, which I have a great and funny experience of going to Hawaii. And my dad lived there at the time, and we'd go to a shopping mall, and Duke Nukem had just come out. It's like, oh, sick, Duke Nukem. It's got to be good, right? And just picking it up, not reading a single review, and just realizing the trash that is that game. But I love that game, actually, very deeply. Not only for my nostalgia, but, Whew. And, Gearbox would go on to make some goofy Alien games, and they have a couple other games in their portfolio, but I think overall I've found them to be a lovable studio in a lot of ways. And so I do have a soft spot for Gearbox. They've always felt like one of those, mid-budget, still kind of just doing their own thing, kind of developers from a bygone era, that, fortunate for them, have found success through a couple of their IPs. But enough about Gearbox. I was reading a little bit from the news and a bit on Wikipedia, about what was going on. And so some background: Gearbox was acquired in April 2021 by Embracer Group, who bought them for $1.3 billion, which is insane. And they bought them from 2K Games, who Gearbox was a part of. And, since they had been working on doing a few things, they opened a couple studios. They were trying to branch out from just being like a game developer to being bigger, with a bigger media presence, from, film and television to so on and so forth, other forms of media. And of course, laying off some people along the way and acquiring a couple companies, as the gaming industry is known to do. But, ever since what's been going on with Embracer has been going on, I guess they've been looking to get rid of some of these studios in some way. And so heard that Take-Two was buying them back, or buying them for $460 billion or so. Hold on, that's million. And it's basically taking all their major franchises, their major studios with them. And I just thought this was pretty crazy news. One, from the lens of Take-Two is buying them. So here's the thing: 2K is part of Take-Two. So 2K sold Gearbox to Embracer for $1.3 billion and is now buying them back at a 70% markdown, essentially, which is very impressive on their behalf, and congratulations to them. It's been a few years only, and Gearbox has expanded their studios, and they're taking all that with them. So congratulations on them. That's an insane win from just like a acquisition sales perspective. But another thing that I often think about is, okay, now you're back under Take-Two, who didn't want you in the first place. I mean, I think Randy had some leadership decision making there, because one of the things that he really liked about Embracer as an idea was the decentralized management that the company was kind of steering themselves toward. But Take-Two as a publisher is kind of a mixed bag. So you have 2K, who they have a history of poor development, I would say, with very aggressive microtransactions in their games. And the last time I can think of 2K really delivering and making like a banger would be, I'm thinking last generation, like Borderlands 2 or even BioShock. You know, like these are the games that come to mind when I think 2K doing something. I mean, one of those is a Gearbox game. So, and then you have Rockstar Games. They're massive. I love Grand Theft Auto games through and through. Mostly on the single player side. Haven't done a whole lot in the multiplayer space. But I've heard similarly they have this very monetary focused style about their multiplayer. You have Private Division, who all I know about Private Division is they ruined Kerbal Space Program 2. And Zynga, who's just out there making mobile games. So when you look at their portfolio as a company, it's kind of a mixed bag from the lens of, you know, Gearbox wanted to really break out, I would assume, from their structure, because Gearbox, I would say, is the developer amongst those that is focused on making video games. And I don't know how much Gearbox has really cared to focus on Borderlands specifically. I know they're making, or at least rumored to be making, another Borderlands game, but I would assume that part of that is due to the fact that I'm sure Take-Two or Embracer, they really saw this as the bread and butter IP of Gearbox, and so wanted them to continue developing games for that. But all to say, I mean, what was the alternative, right? Was Gearbox to be closed and the IP to be sold and everyone be out of a job? I mean, that's what Embracer has been doing with some of its other studios. So another fantastic business decision on Embracer's part. I mean, literally selling for nearly $1 billion loss. And I hope that, you know, through this acquisition, that for Gearbox, they really do have the opportunity to maintain the freedom they were hoping to get under the Embracer model, and can continue to develop games that I'm interested in playing. At the end of the day, that's what I care about. And I think for me personally, Gearbox has been a studio that has continued to deliver over the years. And I'm sure a little bit of that's tainted with nostalgia, because I see them as the Half-Life expansion developers. But, you know, what can I do about that? I mean, that's just how I feel. So, but I'm interested to know what you think. You know, this news was kind of just out of nowhere, but intrigued me nonetheless. What do you think Gearbox's position is in all this? Especially Randy Pitchford. He's always got something interesting to say. But until next time, let me know your thoughts and look forward to seeing you. All right, bye, y'all.